Brad, go. Hold on.
Okay.
You're in.
So someone asked, what is Respondus? Respondus is a package that I believe we've purchased, and you can interface it with Blackboard, but it's basically something that students can run on their computers as long as they're not running a Mac, or maybe it works at Mac now, but it doesn't work with Google Chromebooks or Linux. But it basically stops their browser from being able to go to other places. But it's just a software that we're not really going to talk about today.
Right. Just to give a little bit more, it is like Gavin said, it's an add-on package. It's been around for years and years and years. However, the features of locking down the browser and monitoring students with their webcams are relatively new features to Respondus. But the original intent of Respondus was to be able to do what we're going to be showing you today, which is to import a sets of test questions directly from other sources, such as Word documents or Excel spreadsheets. So it is capable of doing that as well. And we did purchase it as an add-on to Blackboard at Robert Morris, and it's available for everyone. Where it's important for those types of add-on advanced features in Respondus that we just talked about, the lockdown browser and the Respondus monitor, where you monitor through webcams while students in real time are taking exams, is in nursing, for example. Because of the types of exams that they have to give, they use that quite routinely. They also use another software package that they either purchased or it's free, I'm not sure, called ExamSoft, which allows for those exact same features. Again, all of that is really advanced, and that's more than what we're going to cover here today. We're going to go and assume that neither of those advanced software packages were added onto Blackboard, and how do you actually just use Blackboard by itself in order to create exams. And again, we're going to go through three major components. One, how to build the exam and set up the options for the exam. Secondly, how you add questions to exam one at a time by typing in either true, false, multiple choice, fill in the blank, matching, and so on types of questions. And number three, if you already have a test created in a Microsoft Word document, how you change that Word document very easily into a text file, and then you import the text file into Blackboard, and then you can pull in all of the questions at once without having to type them in one at a time in Blackboard. So I'm going to get started with a demonstration of how to set up the exam right now. So I'm going to present. So I'm going to turn that on. And in a minute here, you should be able to see the screen, my Blackboard screen. So can everyone see the Blackboard screen now?
Yep.
Okay, very good. I'm in a course shell that doesn't have anything in it right now, or not, at least not much, just to show you how to set it up from scratch. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go down to week 4, assuming that I'm going to build, let's say, a midterm exam. And I'm going to click on week 4. And notice the toolbars across the top. I'm going to go to assessments, and I'm going to click on test. Okay, scroll down a little bit and notice you see a button here for creating a test. It's as simple as that. Right here under select test below, if there were already exams that were developed for this course, they would be listed here. Also, if I copied over a course from a previous semester and I checked off that I wanted tests to be copied over as one of the items that you normally do, then those would appear here as well, so that you could reuse an exam that you already had developed in a previous version of the course. So anyway, I don't have any here, so we're going to go into create. And so as soon as you go into create, it asks you for some information, and those items that are asterisk here are obviously required. So I'm going to put in a name here, midterm exam. All right, I'm going to come down a little bit, and there's 2 additional items of information that you can provide: description and instructions. You really don't need to provide either of those, because Blackboard will give default instructions based on the options that you select, which we're going to be going over in a minute. And The description is just another description for the exam, which again, you really want to build in as the item when you build the item in Blackboard so that students can read about the test in advance. So I'm going to leave both of those as optional items. Notice they aren't asterisked. So I'm going to leave those blank. And I'm just going to come down here and click submit. What it does is it creates what is referred to as a test canvas. And it tells you that it's your test that you're creating called midterm exam that I just typed the name in for. It says this test has no questions yet. Okay, so what you do at this point is you can go in here to create questions. You can go in here to pick up a pool of questions from somewhere like a Microsoft Word document. But right now, I'm going to bypass both of those, and I'm going to show you how to set up the options for the test first, and then we'll come back later and we'll load questions in to the exam, either one at a time or from a module, meaning from something that you imported from a Word document. So I'm just going to click on OK, and it brings you back to a create test. Here's your test. Now notice that the midterm exam that I just developed for this particular course is now listed here as an exam that will be available in this course. So I'm going to click create. Submit. Okay, I'm sorry. It's already here, so I'm going to click submit here. And then it takes me to the test options. You have to actually select the test from that box. Okay, so now it takes me to the information, all that needs to be entered for how you want students to be able to see the test and what options you want to provide to them. So you're in what is now referred to as the test options area. And there are multiple sections under test options. Test availability, as I'm scrolling down through here. Exceptions to test availability, due date, self-assessment options, test presentation. So what we're going to do is go through those options and talk about them so that you'll know how to set up an exam based on what you want to have accomplished. The first thing here is that you want to put in a description that the students are actually going to see as the link in Blackboard whenever they open up week 4 and they see the item. Then what would the description look like? So I'm just going to put in here just as a placeholder. We'll put more information in later. Here is the course item description link text. Okay, and then we're scrolling down a little. Don't hit submit at this point because then it'll close out the options box. Next option you have here is open test in a new window. The default, as you can see here, is no. That means when the students are taking the test, do you want them to have the test opened in the same Blackboard window that they were in where they initiated it from? Or do you want them to have the option of having another tab in Windows and have the test open up in another window? Not that it's going to prevent cheating, but probably the option you want is the default to leave it open up in the same Blackboard window so that they can't go back and forth between those two items. So I'm going to leave the default set at no. The next section is test availability. Well, you're definitely going to have to click yes here to make the test available, or the entire link under week 4 will not even be seen by the students. So you definitely want to make the link available. Add an announcement for this test. If you click here, then you have the option of going to, or it'll take you to creating an announcement that then will be sent to all students saying that the test is available. I typically don't use that. If I want to create an announcement saying when the test is available, I do it separately outside of this element by using the announcements link in the left-hand navigation panel of Blackboard. So we're going to leave that set at no. Multiple attempts. I really want this to be an exam that they take only once, so I am not going to turn on multiple attempts. But if I do, then I would be able to state how many attempts I want them to be able to take, and I'd also be able to state whether or not the attempts would be graded. For example, it could be an average of all the attempts. It could be the lowest grade, the highest grade, the first grade, as you can see here. So I'm going to take that off again.
can I have a quick question here?
Sure.
As far as the number of attempts? I think if you have multiple choice questions, you can't have more than one attempt, because otherwise they will just keep going back and forth and then they will get the right answer. Would that be reasonable?
Well, that's true, but see, this particular items, making a test, can also be used for other purposes. For example, you could set up a quiz that you want them to be able to take over and over again as practice.
Yeah, yeah,
and
would be a different. Yeah, that would be a
grade it.
test.
And if that's the case, then you would want to use this option.
Correct.
But if it's a real test that you want to grade, you leave it right.
Okay.
You leave it turned off like I did here. So we're going to assume what you assumed, that this is a one-time test that's going to be graded. Okay. And then forced completion. I always set this so that what it does is it forces the students to complete the exam. This works in conjunction with the next item, which is set the timer. I set the timer. Let's suppose I want to allow the students an hour and a half to take an exam. I would put in 90 here. And then I also would click auto submit, because what that does is as the 90 minutes expires, Blackboard will automatically stop the exam, but it will save all the student responses that have been entered to that point, and it'll grade it based on the responses that they gave, which is usually what you want to do.
Another quick question here. How about the special needs student?
That's in the next item. I'm going to be talking about that next.
All right. Thank you.
I have another question. Sometimes it happens that students lose their connection, and if it's a single attempt, they cannot go back in and redo it.
That's
so
true.
Is there any way around that?
No, unless you want to go up here under multiple attempts, but then everybody has a way of doing the exam more than once. What I do when that occurs is they email me, and then I go in, and then I can do, through the exceptions I'm going to show you next, for that particular student, allow him or her to take it again.
I see. Thank you.
Okay. So you wouldn't want to do it with this because it would affect everybody. So as soon as we get down to the next section, I'll show you how you can do that. But that's a really great point, because I have done that on occasions when that happens. Although I must say, it happens kind of infrequently. Usually they are able to get through the test without it being a problem. Okay, now the next item is, did anybody else have any other questions before I move on? And this is great. Just stop me, interject questions as you need to, because then this will really be beneficial in terms of how you set the parameters for your tests. Anyone have questions? Okay. The next section here is about displaying before and after. And I always use this, and I usually click on both. What I've done in the past and made mistakes, and then I have to go back and fix it, and it causes a mess, is I'll go in, I'll change the dates and times, but I'll forget to mark them over here. They don't automatically work together, so you want to make sure you mark them if you want to use it. So for example, if I want to, let's say I want to display like the students won't even be able to see the item appear in week 4 until, let's say, Friday. So I'm going to go into April, and I'm going to choose the 3rd, and I'm going to say 5 o'clock in the evening is when I want them to be able to see this exam. And then I'm going to display this, but I have to be able to display the entire exam until, not just until the due date, but beyond the due date, because I want to give them a couple of days after the due date to be able to look at the results of the test and the feedback that I give them on incorrect responses for each item, which I'll talk about later. So let's suppose I want them to be able to take the test from 5 o'clock on Friday evening through midnight on Monday. And I want to allow them 2 additional days, Tuesday and Wednesday, to review the results. Then what I would do for display until is I would go to Wednesday of next week, because they would start it here. They could take it anytime Friday after 5, Saturday, Sunday, or Monday. But I'm going to put Wednesday at midnight, and I can go down to the bottom here and just say end of day. And that's when the exam will actually even be able to be seen in week 4 as an item for the students. You can make it password optional. I never use the password. Does anybody have any questions on the display after and display until? Okay. Test availability exceptions. Now this is where you can click on users and groups, and you can pick a particular student. Now, there are no students in my class, so I can't show you exactly. But what you would do is you would pick a student, and then there's a way for you to say, change the number of attempts that they can do. So for example, if a student got locked out, like the last question, you could go in for that particular student and say they could have 2 attempts. They already had 1, so you'd say 2. And then what it would do is it would allow them to go in and take it again. Another thing you can do is you can change the amount of time. Notice that I set the time limit on the exam to 90 minutes. Well, if you have a letter, accommodations letter, and many times as an instructor, you get an accommodations letter from a student from Disability Services saying that they have extended time to take the exam, for example, you can go in and say, I want to give them 2 hours to take the exam. So I would go in and choose that student's name and change it to 120 minutes instead of 90 minutes. Or whatever, if you're supposed to give them an extra hour, whatever it says you have the ability to do that. Again, you do it here where it says test availability exceptions, and you click on add user or group. So you would add the user first, and then you would state what type of exceptions you have. Those are the 2 most prevalently used exceptions, and the ones that I've used in the past for those 2 reasons. But if you need any other types of exceptions, I'm not sure, I can't remember because I can't bring it up here now, but if there are any other exceptions available, but we can address that on an as needed basis. So does that answer the questions that were raised about when a student, due to internet connections, gets off or needs to start the exam again, or students with accommodations?
Is that box connected to the roster?
No. Well, yeah, it's not. It's connected to whoever. A list of students will come up that are in that course.
Okay, that's what I wanted to know.
So it's not everybody. It's just students that are in that course.
Yes.
Okay. All right. The next item here is due date. This is different than the display after and display until dates. Remember that this goes all the way through next Wednesday, but the due date for the exam, and again, I need to check it here, is going to be Monday, which is the 6th, at the end of day. And I do not want to allow the students to start the exam if the due date has passed. You can if you want to, and then give late points or whatever, but I just say, if you miss it, you need to contact me, and I need to know why. And then I can make an exception if I want to by going up here to the test availability exceptions, or I can say, sorry, you had every opportunity and the time has passed. Whatever you decide as an instructor that's most appropriate for the situation at hand. The next section is called self-assessment options, and this means self-assessment students, how they assess how they did on the exam. Well, actually, that's the next section, but self-assessment options, there's 2 options here. Include this test in the grade center score calculations, which is typically what you want if it's going to be a graded test. Or you could click on the second one, hide results for the test completely from the instructor in the grade center. And the only reason you wouldn't want to see it and you wouldn't have it graded, again, is if you want to give a practice test and allow them to take it multiple times and you really don't care. But you give them sample questions that they can go through. So most often for a graded test, you're not going to want to do that. And instead, you're going to want to click here. Okay, it's not allowing me to do that for some reason. But we'll go back to that. Okay. Oh, there we go. Okay, it was coming up with a message that I didn't see because it was at the top of the screen. All right, the next one, show test results and feedback to students. There are two sets of options here. What I usually do is leave, or I go here and I leave this one on after submission, because what I want the students to be able to do as soon as they submit their exam is to see how many answers they got right. So for example, if I give a 50-point test, I wanted to show them that they got 47 out of 50, but I don't want them to be able to go in and look at the exam anymore at this particular point. I don't want them to be able to review the answers that they missed. I don't want them to get feedback on the answers until after the due date, until after everybody's taken the exam. So that's where I go down to the second choice and I say after due date, and it tells me when the due date is. Then I want them to be able to see all answers, the correct answers that they gave, all answers submitted, the feedback that I provide, and show incorrect questions as well. So I usually check all of these, and the only time that they'll be able to do it would be after the due date, which would be Monday at midnight. So they'd have all day Tuesday and all day Wednesday to be able to go in and look at it. And then the link would go away from week 4, because up here, I said that the whole exam will only be displayed until Wednesday at midnight. If you want them to see it for the whole semester, then simply click this off, and no matter what's said here, it'll just continue to stay there in week 4. So you don't have to use that option, but again, it's an option that I typically like. Excuse me. So the last section here is test presentation, how you're going to present the test to the students. Do you want them to see all the questions at one time and they can go back and forth and answer and change answers as long as they do it during the 90 minutes that the test is going on? Or do you want to prohibit backtracking? In other words, it'll present a question, they have to answer it, and then they can't go back to it. And then it presents another question, and you no scrolling. You can only see one question on the screen at a time, answer it, and move on. I find that a little too restrictive. I always leave all at once option on. Another option you have.
Want to say something? If you don't want your test to be like copied by students, it's better to show them one question per screen, because they are more likely to.
They'd have to copy. Yeah, then they'd have to copy.
They just capture the whole thing and discuss with other people, and they can even use for another class you teach in the next semester. That's
a choice that you have. Yeah. The unfortunate thing though is it doesn't allow backtracking. So it really, if they decide they wanted to change an answer to a question previously for any reason, that would be difficult then. And it does allow you though, one at a time, prohibit backtracking without this, but I don't know. It's up to you. And then the other option you have here is randomized questions. That means that Blackboard would automatically for you change the questions, the order of the questions that are presented to different students differently. So question 5 for one student might be question 23 for another student. So that also, it doesn't prevent cheating, but it certainly makes collaboration a lot harder. So I always put randomized questions when it's a graded exam as well. Those are all the options that you have for setting up the exam.
John, can I have
any questions on any of them?
Yeah, can you hear me, John?
Yeah.
In terms of randomizing questions, I was trying to make an exam with different types of questions, some short answer, some multiple choice, and I couldn't find any way of putting questions in sections so that you could randomize within a section. Is that possible?
No, you can randomize an entire exam with using a poll. Like, for example, you could have 100 questions.
I had some that were matching and then some that were multiple choice. So the minute you've got both, you can't randomize because
Right.
Okay, thanks.
Sure. Any other questions?
Yes. Can they copy and paste the exam when you leave it in the display?
While they're taking it?
No, earlier you said that you can leave it so they can see it.
They'll have to go into the grade center because it's already graded, and
Right.
they can click on view and view it, and they can do with it whatever they want. I mean, like they could take screenshots because it's going to bring up the results of the exam. If you don't want them to see it, then you simply don't provide that option. You set it so that they can't see it after.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Also, I want to make a comment. So, like, after submission, if you allow them to have multiple attempts, do not show anything before the due date, even for the score per question, because they can figure it out what question they get it right or wrong.
Right, but you can also remember with allowing multiple attempts, you can say grade the lowest score, or grade the first one, or grade the last one. So which one it grades and puts into the grade book, you can dictate here.
Yeah.
If that's an option.
You
That's
know,
an option as well.
One of the things I do on this is I will have unlimited attempts and take the highest one, even with multiple choice. But usually when it's like a homework type of situation where I want them to go through and solve them, but I won't tell them which ones they've got right and wrong. It's almost like they've got to try and figure out for themselves. And in doing that, they usually end up learning the material.
Now, I'm teaching a course right now in COBOL programming, and I give closed book exams in class, and I'm forced to go teach that course now online, and so I had to decide, how am I going to give my exams? Well, what I decided to do, and this might not be appropriate for everybody, but what I decided to do was not make it a graded exam, but instead of worrying about whether or not they were going to be cheating and so on, I made it an open book test. So they can use notes, they can use their PowerPoints I've provided previously, they can use anything that they would like, but I limit the amount of time. So for example, if I have a 100-question exam that are objective type, I might give them something like 90 minutes or 120 minutes. They would not have enough time to look up every answer, only those that they weren't unsure of. And my philosophy is, if they're that unsure about an item, they're not going to get it right. And I want them to go and find it and be able to look up the right answer. Then they'll know it, and they'll probably remember it maybe even longer than they remember some of the other ones. So I really don't have an issue with that. So what I'm going to do is put that in the instructions, and then they can still cheat, they can collaborate and so on, but I don't know how you're ever going to completely stop that. Gavin, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
I have a little question. I want to go back to randomize the questions. I'm not sure if I got your answer right when you said you can't if you have more than one category. Is that what you said? So either you have all multiple choice.
No, that's not what she was talking about.
Oh, okay.
No, you can have a mixture of all different types of test questions in the same exam.
Okay.
But when you randomize it, it will randomize everything. So
Yes.
you'll end up with all of the multiple choice and all the essays or whatever, all jumbled up together. And I think the question was saying, well, what if I wanted my multiple choice first and then maybe my essay second? The only way I can think of, and this is just me, is if you just created two tests.
Yes.
Part one be one type of test with randomized multiple choice, and then the second test be a different one with randomized essay.
That's what I would do. Any other questions here? Okay, then I'm going to continue. So we've set everything up. So I'm going to, and once you have all of the options set, like you can see here, then you click submit, and then it will have created your test. So you see it's created right here. What I'm going to do, since I'm on a smaller screen, so it didn't display the menu. Now it did. So I'll show you that when you go to week 4, you see here's the midterm exam that we just created. Notice it says here, availability. Item is not available. It won't be available until here. Now, if I go and turn edit mode off to show you what the students are going to see, notice it doesn't appear at all. In other words, it's not going to appear for them to see in week 4 until April 3rd at 5 o'clock. So I hope that's clear. And remember the dummy description we put in under options for the link. Here is the course item description link text, where you can simply go in here and say edit the test options, and that you can change that. Now what I'm going to do is show you, I have it in another place in this. Here is the actual instructions that I'm going to give for this midterm exam. In other words, when I go in here and click on edit the test options, this is the content link description. And I can cut and paste from a Word document or whatever that I might have created ahead of time. But if you look in here, this is what's really important for the students. You need to tell them what the parameters are that you set for taking the exam. So for example, I said you can complete this test anytime during this time frame between these dates. Note that you have to complete it before Monday at midnight. Also, once you begin the exam, you have 1 hour, or you can change that to 90 minutes or whatever to complete it. If you go beyond, Blackboard will close it, grade it based on the answers you provided. Any unanswered questions will be marked wrong. I just like to give them more detail. The time limit is set, which will not afford you the opportunity to look up correct responses for every test question, but you can certainly use your textbook or notes during the exam to look up correct responses for several items you're unsure, if that's what you want to do. And then do not click begin until you're ready to take the exam. You can only take it once. Click the submit button after you've answered all the exam questions. There are going to be 63 questions. It tells them about when they can review it and so on. So this is the item that they see in week 4. It gives them all the information about the test in advance whenever you say start displaying it. So you want to do that maybe a week in advance or a few days in advance or whatever, so that they have an opportunity to see how that's going to work.
Would it be useful to put in these instructions if you are gonna give them 1 or 2 attempts just to prepare their minds? Because sometimes they assume that they would have more than 1 attempt, and they
well, yeah, that's why the instructions there said you're only going to have 1 attempt. But yeah, you just alter the instructions for however you want to use the exam, just so you make it clear to the students. So because the more clear you make it to the students, the less questions you're going to get.
Exactly. And I assume also that the test will be graded and posted to the grade center automatically, right? Just like
automatically.
Oh, okay.
Right.
Like the system I use in Connect. Okay.
Okay, so now when the students would go to take the exam, this is what it looks like when they click on the link, when it does become available. This is the default instructions that Blackboard provides based on the options that we just chose. So I don't really see any reason to put in more instructions because of the description you gave, thorough description, and then it just reiterates the thing at the time when they start to take the exam. So I'm not actually going to take the exam, so I'm going to cancel out. Well, I couldn't because there are no questions yet. So what this is at this particular point now is a shell. It's just a place where you can start adding questions for the exam, or it's a place where you can import from a Word document or what have you. So to do either of those things, though, you click on assessments. I'm sorry, you don't click on assessments. Let's go back down here. You click here on the little down icon next to midterm exam, and then you click edit the test. Edit the test options would be if you want to go back and change any of the things that we already did. But editing the test allows you now to add questions one at a time here. Notice you can add essay questions, fill in the blank, fill in multiple blanks or fill in one blank, matching set, multiple answer, multiple choice. Those are different. Multiple answer allows them, like, for example, if you set up a multiple type question where you say, click on all of the items that satisfy this condition. And you have five conditions and maybe only 2 of them are correct. But there's more than one right answer. You want them to click 2. If you're a typical multiple choice question where there's only one right answer out of either 3 or 4 or 5 or however many you provide, that, excuse me, then make sure that you use the multiple choice item. And you can see there's, whoops, let's go down here again. True, false, short answer. Short answer, I've used those in the past, and I've used fill in the blank. The fill in the blank ones in particular can be very difficult for students to answer, because what you do is you assume that they're going to type and spell the item correctly. And if it's spelled incorrectly, even off by one character or whatever, the system's going to mark it wrong. And so, for example, if there's something that's a hyphenated word and they don't put the hyphen in, put it as 2 separate words or run it all together, those are 3 separate options right there. Now, you could give all those options, but you have to try to think of every possible correct answer they could give and list all the possible ones that you want the system to mark correct. And usually what will end up happening is after they review the exam, they'll email me and say, well, there are 3 questions where I answered this one this way, this one this way, and this one this way. And I think they're right, but it marked it wrong. And it's because of the way they entered the response there. And then I have to go back and, which I can do, go back and alter their grade, override their grade and give them the 3 points after I've had a chance to go through and look at their exams, which I have an opportunity to do as well. So I try not to use that option if I don't have to. I almost always use the short answer, the essay, multiple choice, and true false. Those are the 4 that I tend to use to build one at a time. Now, when you want to pull in a whole set of questions from, let's say, a Microsoft Word document, here's where you would go into the reuse questions and click on find questions. And I'll come back to that after I show you how to build or build a poll and bring it in from a Microsoft Word document. But at this point, I'm going to click OK here and get out of this and ask at this point if there are any questions or items for discussion before we move on to one of the other parts I wanted to present. Any questions? Okay, then I think what I'll do is I'll minimize this for right now, and then I'm going to go to show you an exam that here's the exam that I actually gave in class that I talked about before. Notice that it's got all kinds of questions. You can see most of them are multiple choice here. Then we get into some true, false questions. And I have a matching section, fill in the blank section, and short answer section. And this was all one exam that they took in class, closed book. Anybody who just recently joined, if you would please mute your mic, because we're getting some feedback that I'm hearing through. Would really appreciate it until you want to ask a question, and then turn your mic back on. All right, thanks. So what I'm going to do is show you how to convert a few of the questions, the first 16 here, from this exam, then load it into Blackboard, because we don't have time to go through all of it. So I'm going to click out of here and show you those 16 questions. Here's the 16 questions, and notice that I'm going to show you multiple choice and true false. Now notice the last question I added on here is a question that was in my original exam, but it requires the use of a diagram because it asks a question about the diagram. The diagrams cannot be imported into Word. I'm sorry, into Blackboard from Word. So you're going to have to exclude that and then go back and add the diagram in once you're in Blackboard for those items. Just thought I'd show that as in case you have questions of that type. Okay, so what you need to do with this is you need to get rid of, to prepare it for entry into Blackboard, get rid of all of the titles, any header and footer text, and any instruction text. So what you need to do is, for example, delete this, and then you would go down here. Well, if you were where the other instructions were, you would delete that all out. Let's go into the footer, and we'll get rid of the footer in the exam. Okay, and then what you do is you go to.
Excuse me just a minute. Is this all in a Word document?
This is in the Word document.
Okay.
This is your exam, the original exam. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you have all of your exam questions. Remember, you're not going to be able to use this. So I'm going to delete the diagram pieces. And I just want it to be the actual test items themselves that are in text format. Not sure why. Oh, there we go. Okay, so let's take that and show you how to convert it to a text file. Once you have it all in text format, you simply go to File, Save As, and you want to put it into the same folder your document currently exists. Go down to the bottom where it says Save As Type, open that up, and then you'll see where it says Plain Text, TXT. Click on that so that it says plaintext.txt. This will take, and it'll take the file that we had before, and with all those test questions, and it'll save it in a text format. So just click Save. Replace existing. I'm not going to because I already did this once and it's correct already. So I'm going to go back to here, to my folder, and you'll see what it looks like with when I saved it. Now notice that, let me explain that. It has a TXT file extension. This is the original one that was the Word document. So I'm going to go into this one. Now you can click on right click and say open with. You can open it with Word if you'd like, and it'll look like this, which is all text. Or if you double click on it, whatever your default happens to be, which the default is on mine is Notepad. So when I click here, whoops, wrong one I opened, excuse me. Here's, it opens in Notepad. Doesn't matter where you open it, because this is what you're going to end up importing into the converting software. So does everyone understand that? So you've got your test questions now converted to text. The next thing you need to do before is you need to go into that document and you need to number each one of the items. Notice that this has to be number 1 period. This has to be text. This can't be automatically generated numbers from Word when you're in Word. You had to take the automatically numbered items off. I can show you how to do that later if you're not sure, but I'm hoping everybody knows how to turn numbers on and off in numbered items in Word. But at any rate, if you look back at what, I keep doing that, my fault, what got saved, notice that it doesn't have any numbers or letters. Like this first item, test item, doesn't have a 1 in the front of it, doesn't have A, B, C, D. Okay, because you took them off in Word. So now what you have to do is go in and put them on. So for the software package we're using, You have to have it exactly right. Every item has to be the number, a period, and one space, and then the text that follows it. In addition, if it's a multiple choice question, as you can see here, you need to put A, B, C, D in lowercase letters. You have to put a right paren after each one of the letters, like you can see here. And you put an asterisk in front of the one that's considered the correct response. So Blackboard will know when it gets in there what the correct response is. This takes a little bit of time, but it's certainly less time than typing all these questions in, again, one at a time in Blackboard. So you just go through, and here's all the 16 questions that I had in my sample. And notice they're all numbered. Notice the true false has a different layout. When you have a true false question, you simply put the statement, and then you either put on the next line either the word true or false. So here you see two different formats. You see multiple choice and true false all in the same document. But notice that they're numbered consecutively. That's really important. And that for the multiple choice, they have A, B, C, D in parentheses in a certain format, or with a paren in a certain format, and the asterisk precedes the correct answer.
Hey, John, quick question, if I may.
Sure.
Does the question have to be contained on a single line? In other words, if it goes over to a second line, is that going to in any way affect when you put true false in there?
No, it will if you hit the return and put it on the second line. But if it just automatically does it itself, it's perfectly fine.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Yeah, that's a really good question, because anytime you put a hard return in there, it's going to screw up what gets converted. Okay. But the other thing you have to keep in mind that the software conversion package requires is that there be one blank space between each question. So in addition to them being numbered correctly, the multiple choice letters being formatted correctly, the correct response being indicated, you need to have one blank line. You can see that there's one blank between each one of the 16 items. Okay, so now this particular document is ready to go. In other words, it's ready to create a, to be put into the conversion package to create. So next thing I'm going to do is to show you that. I put the link into a Word document so that I could demonstrate it for you. But this is the link that you're going to need, which we'll make available to you. There are a number of free open source software packages on Google or on the web that you can search with Google that will automatically convert these text documents to Blackboard format to be loaded in. Blackboard doesn't offer anything specifically. Now, as I mentioned before, the software package add-on Respondus that we purchased will also allow you to do conversion. But I'm not using Respondus. I'm using a third-party software package here. So let me open this up. I'm sorry, just give me 1 minute here. I don't think I copied it from here. Let me do that. There we go. Okay, now this is the software package that the add-on or the generator that's free, open source. It was created by the College of Southern Idaho, as you can see here. It says this tool is not being maintained any longer, but it still works. It's worked for years. It's recommended you find a new tool if Blackboard ever does anything to change the way that they want things imported. But as I mentioned, I've been using it for 4 or 5 years, and that's not the case. There's documentation associated with it that I'll show you in just a minute, but it's really an easy generator. The reason that they're not maintaining it anymore is because in 2016 or 17, this particular university went to Canvas from Blackboard. So that's the only reason. If you go to the documentation, that little link that I just clicked on, it tells you how to format the different types of questions in the text file, .txt file, to make sure that it'll be converted correctly. So does everyone see here on multiple choice, for example? That's where I'm telling you that you have to have the items numbered, 1 period and a space, A with the right paren, putting an asterisk in front of the correct choice, and so on. For true false, there are several different ways. Where's true false? Here it is. To do it, you can put the word true or T or an F after it on this next line. But those, for each one, it tells each question type in Blackboard tells you how it has to be formatted to be converted in. Does everyone see that? Any questions?
Are all these done in number lock?
What?
You have number turned on?
In where? Word?
When you have your conversion and you're adding the numbers and letters?
Right, you do that manually.
But you do it with number lock and not?
Doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter, okay.
Yeah. Okay, so back here, we're gonna put in a name. So we're gonna call it midterm exam questions. And then what you do here is you simply go to your document that's already been formatted. I will click on select all. Well, I'm going to do it this way. I'm just going to select it all this way, and I'm going to right click and say copy and close that now. And I just paste them all right in here. I use paste to get all the questions put in here. Oh, I don't think I got the first part of number 1. So let me do that again. All 16, copy and paste them in here. There, got question 1 through question 16. I don't want that blank at the end, so I'm going to get rid of that, because that shouldn't go into the converter. Then I page down and it says create quiz. It's as simple as that. Click on create quiz. And then it says, your test seems to have 16 questions. That's a good thing, because that's how many questions I wanted it to convert. The package is available here. Just click here. And you see down here, it'll create a zip file right here. So what you do is you can go to downloads, where it downloaded your that particular document. I'm going to right click and I'm going to copy it. And I'm going to put it into my folder with my test. Paste. There it is. So there's the zip file that I'm going to use to import into Blackboard. Any questions there? Okay. Now, I'm done with this. So I'm going to have to open up Blackboard again. I'm going to go to the course that I was demonstrating from. Open up my menu. I'm going to go to Course Tools. And there's an option here called Tests, Surveys, and Polls. You click on that, and you can import tests, surveys, and polls. What this is going to be considered, because it's not yet a test, is a poll. So you click on Polls, and you click on Build Poll. I'm sorry, you click on Import Poll. And then you browse your computer. I'm in Tuesday's presentation. Go to the zip file that we just created. Click Open. And it'll say, give you the name. So this is the pool you're importing. Then you click Submit. And then it tells you that it was created. The package has been processed. The log is below. There's just an OK button. Click OK. And now under Pools, there's the pool. It has 16 questions in it. This is when it was created. So now it's available to pull into your test. Anybody have any questions there? Great. Okay, so now I'm going to go back to week 4, where we created our exam, the blank one without questions. I'm going to click here and I'm going to say edit the test. And go to reuse questions, find questions. And there's my pool. Just click on it. And it brings in all the questions. Now you'll need to click here to select them all, because it says, copy selected questions. So, and then click Submit. And the questions are now available for you to see in the test, as if you were going in to create them one at a time. Anybody have any questions there? Now,
is there an alternative to this?
I'm sorry?
Is there an alternative to this?
To typing them in one at a time.
Oh, that's it. I see.
Well, so I use a spreadsheet when I do, and I can show you that in a second.
Sure.
So I think there are many different ways to do this.
Right. This is just one. I find it pretty easy because I had so many questions. I did like 60 some questions. Sometimes I have 100 multiple choice questions, and I do not want to type 100 multiple choice questions into Blackboard one at a time again. I want to bring them in from a Word document where they're already sitting. It doesn't make sense to me to type them all again, because you'll see when hopefully Gavin shows you how to create a multiple choice question in Blackboard here. It takes some time to type in each one of those distractors as well as the question itself.
I have a question. Can you build pools for different chapters? Like, I want some question from chapter 1 or chapter 2. Like, I can, because if I have so many pools in one questions.
Yeah, you can. You just go in to find questions, and there will be multiple pools here. Then you just click the pool, and you don't have to bring them all in. You can bring in whichever ones you want. Like if you want this question and then this question, and then you click Submit, and it'll bring in 2 or 3 questions from that pool, and then you'll go back out and choose another pool and so on. So yeah, you can pull questions from different pools.
Okay.
Another question. Now, if I have a pool with a lot of questions, can I make the test randomize the questions for each student as a subset?
I'm sorry, can you repeat the question?
Now, can I make a randomized selections from the pool for each student?
Yes. Yes, you can. But if it's going to be a randomized selection, do you mean less questions than all of the questions in the pool?
Yes. Like
yeah, there is a way to do that.
And for each student.
Yeah, yes. And so no 2 students would have the exact same questions.
Exactly.
Yes, you can do that, and you do it from here. This is correct. You do it from a poll. There's an option to do that. I'm not sure exactly where that option is at the moment, but I can look that up and get back to you. And also, I have some resources to show you at the end from Blackboard itself, and it shows you how to do that in those resources as well.
Very good. Thank
But
you.
that's why you have multiple pools built. There has to be a reason why you want that set of questions to be isolated by itself and not in with just a whole series of questions. And it's really kind of meaningful if you name your pools with descriptive names. So later you'll know what kind of pools you have that you're working with. So I know that this pool is a set of questions that I want for my midterm exam in this course.
John, I have a question. I don't know if you plan to show how I can put a diagram into a question so that I can relate to it in the questions.
Yes, we will when we get into when Gavin shows you, for example, on that when building a multiple choice question one by one. That's when you go in and add parameters, things like feedback on that question, what you want to tell the students when when they get the wrong response. You can also at that moment add a diagram in as well.
Okay. All right.
So we're going to get that in just a minute.
Thanks.
Well, John, if you're right there, do you want to just go down and click on one of your questions?
Sure, I can do that too. Okay.
Yeah, go down and click on it, because that would be easy.
Okay, I'm fine with that. All right, so here, now in this particular test, we have 18 questions. We had 16, but I selected 2 from that poll and added them in so they're repeated. So you might want to, I'll show you how you can go in and
well, John, if you've uploaded one, like you did in your Word document, there was one that had a diagram, but you weren't able to upload it. But if you click on the little sort of chevron-y, arrowy thing down by your question, you can edit the question, right?
Right.
And then
you can edit it from a number of different places.
And Peter, that might be the best way to then add the diagram.
Yeah. Okay, here's where I'm going to go in first and just show you how to set up a multiple choice question. Did everybody see how I got in here? In case you didn't, let me cancel out. You go to create question when you're in the test canvas, and I'm going to go down here to multiple choice. And I usually don't use a question title. Here's where you would put the stem of the question. Coming down here, you want the A, B, C, D to be a vertical list. No partial credit. Here you also have an ability to show the answers in random order. So for example, A wouldn't always be the correct answer for everybody. It'll scramble the A, B, C, D. Not only does it did you want to scramble by randomizing the test questions, but now you can also scramble the A, B, C, D for multiple choice if you want to by clicking here. Number of correct answers. You don't always have to have 4. You could have 3. You could have 5. You could have 2 choices. So you can change the number. Let's say we're going to stick with 4. This would be, I'm just going to put in item 1, go down here, item 2. This would be your distractors. Item 3. Item 4. You see, if you were building, if I had 100-point multiple or 100-question multiple choice test, I'd have to build these one at a time. And that takes an awful lot of time, as you can see, because you got to type in or cut and paste from a Word document all the items as well as the.
I don't think you can have less than 4.
What's that?
I don't believe you can have less than 4 answers here.
Well, whatever the lowest number here is. Yeah, it's not allowing you to, right? But what will happen is you can have less than 4 because I have it all, do that all the time. It's just that I don't put anything into. Oh, here's how you do it. If you go to answer 3, you simply go over here and say remove. And then you have 1, 2, and 3 only. Okay?
Okay, thanks.
And notice that you have to have one of these selected as the correct answer. So let's suppose that B is, or the second one is the correct answer. Then I'd go in the front of answer 2 and click here for correct answer. Okay? And feedback. Correct response feedback, you can put that in if you want. Incorrect response feedback. This took me forever to do for 63 items the other day by looking up and saying where in the textbook or where in the notes or what slides and PowerPoint presentations I could find the right answer. Let's say that. And you don't have to do that. That's optional. You don't have to put incorrect and correct feedback if you don't want to. Instructor notes if you want. And then you can either submit and create another, which will keep you in the flow of creating another multiple choice question, or you can click submit. Now I have 19 questions. Okay. And then if you go down to the bottom here, to get out of this, you would click OK. But one thing I want to show you here is that I don't know why this default is set this way, but in Blackboard, it defaults to every question being worth 10 points, which is a real nuisance. So what I do up here is I put 1 point, update. Oh, my fault. Have to select all first so that there's a check mark in the front of all the items in the test. Then I say, make it 1 point, update. And now every test question is 1 point instead. You can also go in and edit any test question. So for example, to answer Peter's question earlier, I had a question here that I was trying to find it. Maybe it brought it in. The one that needs the diagram. Here. This flow represents which of the following structures. And notice I had put a message into myself to say insert an image so that I would know that I needed to do that before I make the test available. So you just click here and click on edit for just clicking that one, editing that one question. And I'm going to take this out. And then what you can do is you can use the insert, edit, embedded. No, I'm sorry. There's an image one here. Here, insert, edit image. Mm-hmm. And then you need to find it. I'm going to browse my computer. Here's my selection flow image that's for that particular question. Click open, and it brought it in. Insert. And there it is with that question when it gets presented to the students. Okay, so now that question is edited. Notice I could change anything. I could change the way, any of the options for the question that I wanted to.
May I get back to that?
Or whatever.
Image.
Then click submit. And then when we go down to look at that question, here's the question. This flow represents which of the following structures? And there's your selections, and there's the correct answer.
Yeah, so what I sometimes do. Sorry, Peter.
Yes, I want to ask about the image. Is there any way to make it bigger and smaller? Because quite often I try to bring it in. It's a totally wrong side, way too big or way too small.
Yeah, in the earlier one when if you can go back and edit it as well, when you're in that area where you can change all of the text settings and everything else. If you click on the image, you can resize it by just dragging the corners.
Okay.
What I sometimes do is when I create my file, where John had insert image, I will sometimes have the name of the file, because if I have a lot of them,
yeah,
I can just easily go in and. But I've never found a way to do it other than by hand when it comes to importing it in this way.
Yeah, me either. This is the only way I know to do it. So it can be quite labor intensive to build an exam if you're just using the raw features of PowerPoint. That's the reason I wanted to show you how you could use a third-party generator to bring it in from a Word document.
I will say, in terms of the reason I like doing like the way John's explained here, keeping all your information in a separate document and then importing it separately, because if in 5 years' time, if Blackboard disappears or whatever, and we're on a different system, all those things that you write in Blackboard and then save as a zip file, all of those would go away. And so having them separately would make it easier to import into different systems in the future.
Right.
So I think that makes sense. I can quickly show you how I do it if you want.
I'm gonna stop presenting then, and then you can go in and present, Gavin. Okay.
This will only take like a minute. It'll be really,
Okay.
really quick, because everything I do. Here we go. Everything I do is almost identical to what John does. So, but if you can see my computer now, if I go over here, this is one of the classes I teach, and I use. I hope it's not too small because my screen is kind of like that. But the I do mine in a spreadsheet. And so I don't use a third party. I just import it directly in. And what Blackboard generally needs is it needs this code at the front where MC is for multiple choice. And then you put the question, and then there's a tab, and then there's the answer and whether it's correct or not, and so on. I put the link to the Blackboard site where it explains the format for different questions in the discussion board on our Blackboard. But this is sort of how I do it, and that way I can just copy and paste. The one thing that I will sort of highlight for those who do math, you can do things like this. This is for doing like superscripts in HTML. So for the engineers or mathematicians out there, you can do math, but it has to be more in a HTML format. And I know Heather was asking about LaTeX, and so for the math people who use LaTeX, you can do that as well. And I talked a bit about that. But what I do when I'm ready, I just copy this portion of it. So the top is the header. I don't copy that, and the numbers on the side is just for my benefit. So I don't copy that either. I just copy these cells, and then what I would do is I would paste it into just a regular text document. So my text document looks like a mess, like it's not something that I would directly edit, but it's got like it's got the question, and then it's got the answers, and then there's got a tab in between each cell in your spreadsheet. And just like John was able to create the zip file and then upload the zip file, you can upload this directly into Blackboard as well. So I just wanted to show an alternative way of doing that step, but I'm sure there are as many ways of doing it as there are instructors. And so everyone's probably got their own little quirks, and whatever works for you works.
Okay, does anyone have any questions? We showed you how to build a multiple choice question. It's very similar for the other types. I think it's pretty intuitive when you go in to, again, now let me share my screen one more time with you just real quickly. Okay, when you click on the down arrow next to the exam and click edit the test, then you bring up all the test items that have already been entered. You can delete items, you can add new items, and so on. And you add new items by going over here a whole bank of questions like we did before by going here. But for example, if you want to create a true-false question, got to get it up so that it stays. There we go. True-false. It's very similar. You put the stem of the question, right, or the question itself, or the item here, the statement here, and then you choose whether it's true or false. Then you give the feedback for correct and incorrect. And if you want to stay in the mode of entering 10 true and false questions, you would just click submit and create another, and it would just keep allowing you to create them. And when you're done with all of them, then you would click submit. So that's how you get back in to make changes, delete test questions, add test questions, and so on. Now, you can't do that after you open the test up for students to take, obviously. This would be before you make it available.
You know, one of the interesting things, if you do go in and edit, because sometimes I've messed up, I've created an answer and the answer's wrong. And then the students have been like, I got this question right, but it said it was wrong. And it's me, I just messed up. If I go back in and I correct it, all those students who got it wrong, it will show up correct. Like Blackboard will remember their answers and then correct them after I've corrected the answer.
Right.
So it's a feature. The other thing as well, and this is mainly for the math and the engineers and science folks, but you can create formula questions, and in those you actually type in an equation, and you give the variables different names, and it'll calculate the answer based upon changing the numbers in the equation. I've found that it's only about 80 to 90% accurate. Blackboard has a very weird way where it can't calculate exponents correctly. So for those people who do that, the formula is a nice feature, but you got to be real careful.
Okay, I'm going to stop presenting now. And again, I'll open it up to anybody who's here who wants to ask any questions at all about testing in Blackboard in general.
I do have a question. It's actually about it's not about setting up the test, but the points, how it's calculated. Because my question is for the multiple answer question. For example, you have 4 answers, like 2 or 3 of them are right. And how it seems like Blackboard calculate, if I allow like a partial credit, I'm not sure like how Blackboard calculated. It seems like it's not the way I assume how they count the points.
I've done partial credit on matching because for example, if you have a 10, like say 10 items in matching, what I do is I go in and assign it 10 points, and then I say allow partial credit, and then I put 1 point for each one. And Blackboard, that's assuming that there's one correct response for each item that they're matching up. If there are multiple correct answers, honestly, I don't know how Blackboard does, and I don't know how to set that up. I've never done one of those.
Okay.
Any other questions that we can answer? Okay, Rick, if I see you're still there, if you could probably stop the recording at this point, that would be great.